With that, we will call to order the Borough Assembly meeting for Tuesday, February 28th, 2020. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mark.
Mark is excused, although he may be calling in. I will announce it if he does.
Chelsea.
Here.
Taylor.
Taylor is excused.
Brandy.
Here.
Bob.
Bob is also excused, but may also be calling in.
Jay.
Present.
Jeff.
Here. Right on. That means, for those listening at home, we have 4 people present in the room this evening. Let us stand for the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Which brings us to item number 3, approval of minutes for the February 3rd, 2020 Assembly meeting minutes. I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
Been moved by Member Mucci and seconded by Member Tremblay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That passes unanimously. Brings us to item number 4, amendment and approval of tonight's meeting agenda. Are there any amendments people would like to make?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Member Mucci.
Mr. Mayor, under communications, I'd like to add the letters regarding critical access from Senators Murkowski and Stevens, as well as a communication from Senator Stedman regarding the Cake Petersburg Road, a letter from the city of Kupreanof regarding the Cake Access Road, a letter from Becky Knight regarding the Cake Access Road, and a letter from Global NRG dated tomorrow regarding the Cake Petersburg Road.
Audrey, is there a second to add those to, you said that under communications, you said, Member Mucci?
Yes, sir.
And seconded by Member Morale. Any discussion amongst the Assembly about adding these into the agenda? Yes, Member Mucci.
So just for clarification, we get these under communications, and these will be on the website in the near future for folks to read them?
Correct. I will add them to the agenda tomorrow morning when I get to work.
Okay, thank you.
Member Tremblay, you were going to chime in on that?
I noticed a slip of the tongue with Senator Stevens, so for the record, Senator Sullivan sent in one of the letters.
I'll do that, and thank you, Member Tremblay.
Time.
Yeah, it's time.
Any further discussion on that amendment to the agenda? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
No opposed. That passes unanimously. In that case, I entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended, unless there's any further amendments.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Morale, to approve the agenda as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That passes unanimously. Which brings us to public hearing. Tonight we have a public hearing for Ordinance 2020-02, an ordinance amending Petersburg Municipal Code, Chapter 14.20, titled Municipal Harbors, to add various rental, change, and cancellation fees. If there's anyone here who would like to testify to this evening, now's the time to come forward. Seeing none, the public hearing is closed. There are no bid awards this evening. Brings us to item number 7, persons to be heard with items related to the agenda. If anyone would like to speak to items related to the agenda, please come forward and state your name at the microphone. As always, you'll have 5 minutes to speak your piece. Please proceed, Mr. Tremblay.
This may not take 5 minutes. I'm Bill Tremblay. Do you have anything else? Where I live? Okay.
Who you represent?
Okay, representing myself.
Sounds good.
Discussion regarding the Cake Road. And let's clarify, there's been a lot of information and different things discussed recently about this project, but it is about the road. It's not about the intertie. The intertie is not a part of this discussion. In fact, when the federal government was looking at doing documents regarding the intertie and the road, they kept them separate and made sure that they included that language in those documents, that those are separate projects. So we're talking about the state DOT road, which according to the state is being proposed for recreation and subsistence use, period. Unfortunately, the state DOT access project on their website further confuses things by quoting the Forest Service EIS regarding the intertie instead of the Federal Highways Administration work that they did concurrently with the state, which ended in 2016 when they determined that the road served no purpose and need. Basically, when they went to the both communities after 3 years of analysis, they determined that neither community wanted the road, there wouldn't be enough traffic to support it, and it would be unlikely to be funded because they didn't have money at the time to maintain it. And what makes us think that now we have more money 3 years later, as we cut our universities, cut our ferries, we cut our public broadcasting, we cut almost every state other service, thinking that all of a sudden we're going to have money for a road that nobody's going to use. State DOT at the time, when looking at this road, was telling us that the likely maintenance crew would be coming from Petersburg to maintain the road. Let's think about that. January, February, March, what's usually happening? Those guys are usually up, hot-footing it up at the airport, making sure the runway is cleared for our 2 jets. When will they have the time to find somebody who's going to be private enterprise, not provided by the state, to move their trucks or their personnel to 12 Mile to start doing the road maintenance, to go how far on a 40-mile-an-hour road, on a 40-mile road, to do what and for who? I think it's particularly disappointing that they would use examples like the Guardian flight in this discussion. I mean, who's second-guessing some medical technicians or medical professionals' judgment as to whether or not a medevac flight is needed to take somebody off of an island to better medical facilities? Let's think about, well, getting them to Petersburg. Why? How many people do we know who've taken medevac flights out of Petersburg because we don't have adequate facilities for those emergency needs? Who's to second guess what happened in that? The Transportation Department hasn't determined the final outcome of what the cause was of that, and it's tough to speculate. It's a very difficult situation, awful situation, but it's nothing to do with the road. And we want to talk, if we want to just digress a little bit for the intertie, keep in mind that the Forest Service and CAKE, for most of that stretch, already have roads that are being used for logging. They'd be sufficient for supporting any type of intertie. The Swan Tyee intertie that was built had no roads built. That was all done by helicopter, and so we've seen those other type of projects, long projects, big projects being done without the need for a road. So I guess, when it comes down to looking at the road project, please get rid of all the extra baggage. Look at what the analysis was, which was it's too expensive, we can't maintain it, and it's not going to be used. And it's $40 million. It's regrettable to think that $40 million may go back into the state coffers for other uses, but considering the governor today was on Talk of Alaska talking about how broke the state is, don't you think there might be a higher purpose in building a road that nobody's going to use? Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else who'd like to testify or speak to items on the agenda? Mr. Beebe, go ahead. Very good. Your name and who you represent, please, sir.
Hi, my name is David Beebe. I'm speaking on behalf of myself and fellow residents dependent upon mainline ferry service. I'd like to thank the Assembly for pulling off an excellent draft resolution opposing Senator Stedman's multi-million-dollar, quote, subsistence and recreation road to nowhere. Given the demonstrated public opposition to such a project description of the purpose and need being for subsistence and recreation, I find to be especially insulting, disingenuous, and beyond the pale of acceptable conduct of state government and elected representatives. That this occurs while in the protracted grip of a state-engineered and maintained fiscal crisis is especially offensive. The description and title of the project, CAKE Petersburg Road, has been a historic and deliberate put down by the Alaska Department of Transportation of the existence and concerns of the city of Kupreanof and its choice since inception to be a designated roadless community by ordinance. Questions remain regarding public notice, public process, a history of avoidance of constituents by responsible elected representatives, disregard of a long-standing history of public opposition for this road and the replacement of the mainline ferry service, and failures to provide opportunities for answering ongoing concerns and questions. It is my understanding that road funding would become available if these multi-million-dollar funds were returned to the general fund and applied to maintaining ferry service in our archipelago. I've been made aware that there is a letter from Senator Stedman that claims road funding, however, cannot be used for ferry service. And also that given Governor Dunleavy vetoed an additional $5 million in funding for ferry service that had already been approved by the legislature, that this was a sufficient basis for precluding the possibility of these $30 to $40 million being redirected to our most urgent need. These statements, however, do not preclude the fact that scores of millions of dollars can indeed be spent on maintaining a modest level of ferry service. And of course, the ferry service is for the purposes of maintaining livelihoods and basic necessities of life, and for maintaining the regional economy. And also, these statements seem to be contradictory and fail to demonstrate Senator Stedman's commitment to Southeast Alaskans and their historic reliance and support for a mainline Alaska Marine Highway system. It concerns me greatly when a $40 million speculative road project intended to replace the mainline ferry service is being represented as nothing more than a road to promote subsistence and recreation. Furthermore, this is a fiscal crisis which Senator Stedman himself played a key role in helping to engineer by refusing to address basic financial risk that accompanies the ability of state government to function through revenue streams that won't be dependent upon the vagaries of commodities markets or whatever. So again, thank you so much for representing the residents of the borough as well as all of Southeast Alaska who depend upon the mainline ferry service.
Thank you, Mr. Beebe. Anyone else like to testify or speak to items on tonight's agenda? Okay. Seeing none, that brings us to persons to be heard on items unrelated to tonight's agenda. Anybody would like to speak to items unrelated to the agenda? Now is the appropriate time to do so. Sure. Chief Kerr, go ahead.
Hello, my name is James Kerr, Chief of Police for Petersburg. I would like to address our current process for parades and events that impact traffic flow. Just recently on Sunday, we had the Elizabeth Brodovich parade. I was notified. We had a process. I talked to their tribal administrator, and we had a process that was pretty well outlined that if it grew in size, if they had dancers that were going to come over, they would notify us so that we could shut down the road so that it would make it safer for everyone, for drivers, pedestrians, everyone. And I guess the way it had been done before is they would notify me of a parade, and if they needed the road shut down, we would notify Chris and we'd get the barricades set up. And so, needless to say, this parade grew in size, and with the lack of communication, I'm requesting that we look into developing an ordinance for like a permit or letter of approval for parades and events that are in the roadway. And some of the things we came up with was a fee, and the fee isn't really just a fee. I mean, we're not going to be using it to make the borough money or anything. It'll be a fee to let us know that, you know, they're really serious about it. It's just a $20 or $25 fee, and my idea for the fee is that it goes into a separate account or goes into someplace so that we can use it to replace barricades. I understand barricades cost a lot more, but as it adds up and we use them, we can just put that money back to the people who are giving it to us. So the borough's not gaining anything by it, and we're supplying the manpower for the parade, for leading it, and setting out all the barricades and then picking them up. So I was looking at some of the exempt events I was thinking of would be Mayfest, because the borough's involved in that. 4th of July and the Christmas tree, the borough participates in all those, Parks and Rec does, or so those things would not need it because those are big events. I would request that we have a 2-week notice prior to the event, an outline of the event, and a printout of Google Maps or something that's highlighted the route the parade will follow. And we can even use this for like block parties, say a neighborhood. A perfect example would be like the Coast Guard section wants to have a block party up there. If they do this process, we can shut down that whole entire street right there, and they can just have their block party right there or something, or some other neighborhood wants to. I would request that we have contact names and numbers for all the event organizers so that we can stay in contact with them. And then just this would pertain to anything in the roadway that affects the flow of traffic. So like the high school doing their noise parade, that doesn't affect the flow of traffic. They're moving with the flow of traffic. It doesn't affect it. So just anything where we have to shut down that section of road for public safety type stuff. So, and then on these type of events, we would just, if it's over the weekend, the Public Works can just go out, set the stuff at the corners, and then whoever's the event organizers can dedicate someone to set those barricades up prior to the event and take them down, and then Public Works will come back on Monday and pick them up and haul them off. So it's just, we need to have a process. We never had a process before. It's just been, I'd say the good old boy system is, yeah, you're good to have that, but we need to get it organized and structured so we don't have any issues like this again.
Thanks, Chief. I look forward to the discussion that will come along with 6 weeks' worth of readings for an ordinance. So
Okay.
look forward to being part of the process. Thank you, Chief.
Thanks.
I believe I saw Erin Michael with her hand up before.
So my name is Erin Michael, and I'm with Petersburg Public Health, and I got a request to come and talk about, very briefly, what we would do in the event that there was a cruise ship that potentially had coronavirus. So just wanted to briefly give you an update of what the process that the state is thinking should happen if that occurs. So if we have notification of reportable illness of any kind, whether that be coronavirus or something else, they will report that to the State of Alaska Epidemiology and the CDC quarantine station. And then at that point, the normal process would be we would contact the hospital if they need additional levels of care. And so the hospital's here, but anyway. And the hospital would take over their care at that point if they need additional care. The CDC would handle the coordination of specimen collections and transportation of those collections of labs. And then at that point, if there are confirmed cases on the ship, they would isolate those individuals on board unless they had required additional care. So at that point, if that happens, then they would go to the hospital. Or if the hospital runs out of space, then they might go to other hospitals in the state. This is handled on a case-by-case criteria. The quarantine of other persons on the ship will be determined by the CDC quarantine station. That's not something that I would decide, but that would be the CDC. The U.S. Border and Protection also would be involved in that. And the CDC has established specific guidelines for cruise ships on managing people that are ill on ships. So that's what we're looking at.
Great.
Thanks so much, Aaron. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else with views unrelated to tonight's agenda that would like to speak? Okay. Seeing none, that brings us over to board, commission, and committee reports, and there are none. For our consent agenda tonight, I'm going to lump them both into one vote. For those listening at home, consent agenda is usually things that don't require a lot of discussion or opposition, so they're somewhat of a formality, but I'll read off what we've got tonight. We've got Beachcomber Lodge, LLC, the 2020/2021 liquor license renewal. We also have the Loyal Order of the Moose, number 1092, their 2020 and 21 liquor license renewal also. I'd entertain a motion to approve these two liquor license renewals.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by member Tremblay and seconded by member Morrell. Are there any voices of opposition that would like to be spoken in regards to them? Clerk, call the roll.
Brandy?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
And those are approved unanimously. With that, moving on to a report of other officers, Petersburg Medical Center CEO Phil Hofstadter is going to give us an update. Go ahead, Phil, and thank you.
Good evening. Phil Hofstadter, Petersburg Medical Center CEO. I have a few updates here. First is our master planning for a new facility is complete. We have some binders here. I can leave them here, or I can provide them with an electronic version, whichever you prefer, if you'd like a copy. And we'll be working on some next steps and some second phase, if you will, on some of those, and I'll keep you informed, obviously, as those progress. We have a health fair coming up April 4th, and most of March we'll provide blood draws for the community, and this is an opportunity to get some screening done. There's just a nominal fee of $45 for that, and we will have a number here that you can contact for more information, 772-5737, or you can email healthfair@pmcak.org. And that's the health fair on April 4th. This should be a great opportunity. Prior to the health fair, we'll have a community run working with PIA. We're going to put something together. We'll have more information on that as well as it comes up. So looking forward to that. Next week, it's legislative season, so I'll work with our state association, Alaska State Hospital Nursing Home Association, ASHNA, and we'll be flying in next week to discuss all things related to health care, and we'll have an opportunity to meet with legislators as well. And then the last thing is we don't have a budget meeting. We don't have a board meeting this month, but next month in March we will have a board meeting, and we'll update on a number of these items as well as our budget, which we'll have a preliminary for March to push over to the borough as well. And those are my updates.
Any questions for Phil?
Thanks.
Phil, thanks so much.
Yep.
All right. Moving forward, that brings us to the mayor's report. Bear with me as I pull that up. We're seeking letters of interest for borough residents to serve on the Public Safety Advisory Board until the October 2020 municipal election. Letters of interest may be mailed to Clerk Thompson at P.O. Box 329, Petersburg, AK 99833, emailed to dthompson@petersburgak.gov, or dropped off at the clerk's office in the municipal building at 12 South Nordic Drive. For more information, please contact Clerk Thompson at 772-5405. And the Alaska Municipal League Winter Legislative Conference. Mayor Jensen, Assemblymember Lynn, and Manager Giesbrecht are in Juneau for the AML Legislative Conference this week, and we look forward to hearing their updates when they get back. That is the end of the ever-so-brief mayor's report. There's no manager's report tonight, because as mentioned, Steve is in Juneau at the AML conference. Which brings us to unfinished business. Ordinances for third and final reading. We've got Ordinance 2020-01, an ordinance amending Petersburg Municipal Code, Chapter 14.30, titled Mountain View Manor Elderly Housing and Assisted Living Facility, to increase assisted living rental and service rates, and to add a new level 4 of assisted living care. I would entertain a motion to approve this in its third reading.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Member Amici and seconded by Member Morrell. Just for those listening at home, if adopted, this will increase assisted living rental and service rates to be more in line with Medicaid and other assisted living facility rates within the state of Alaska, and will add a new level of 4 of assisted living care. In its first reading, Ordinance 20-01 was amended to provide for refund procedures in the event of an error in billing or payment of rental rates or services, and 2, dispute resolution procedures, and 3, procedures for refunds, rebates to existing residents when the facility receives unanticipated revenues from funding sources outside the facility's rate structure. As amended, the ordinance was unanimously approved in its first and second readings. Any further discussion by the Assembly? Clerk, call the roll.
Brandy?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
And that passes unanimously in its third and final reading. Brings us to ordinances for its second reading. Ordinance 2020-02, an ordinance amending Petersburg Municipal Code, Chapter 14.20, titled Municipal Harbors, to add various rental, change, and cancellation fees. I'd entertain a motion to approve this in its second reading.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Member Mucci and seconded by Member Tremblay. Discussion. As for those listening at home, if adopted, Ordinance 2020-02 will add rental fees for electrical adapter plugs and fees for any change to a tourist ship's docking schedule or location, and will add language to clarify that prepaid tourist ship docking or user fees will not be refunded for ship cancellations received by the Borough after April 30th each year. The Harbors and Ports Advisory Board supports all fees proposed in this ordinance, and the Assembly approved it in its first reading, and I believe that, yes, unanimously in its first reading. Further discussion by the Assembly? Clerk, call the roll.
Jeff?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Thank you.
And that passes in its second reading unanimously. We have no new business today. We have, under communications, we had 6 letters entered into the agenda earlier for folks to read online if they so desire. Once they're up, probably tomorrow or the next day. Clerk Thompson?
I will get them up tomorrow morning.
Thank you kindly. And there's one also on here. It's a City of Cake letter to Governor Dunleavy regarding the Cake Access Road project. Mayor Jensen has provided a copy of the attached letter from the City of Cake to Governor Dunleavy regarding the Cake Access Road project. And that also will be available online to view for any interested parties. No thoughts from the Assembly on that? Okay. Assembly discussion items. The Cake Access Road project. I requested this as an agenda item, and draft resolution opposing the Cake Access Road project is attached for discussion. I suppose I'll open the conversation, at least to begin, since it was my item. I wanted it as a discussion item here out of the gates to give as much community input to receive as much community input as possible. My logic was getting this on early, gives 2 weeks before this meeting, another 2 weeks before the next, because Clerk Thompson, I would like that as an action item for our March 2nd meeting, please.
Yes, sir.
Before I go any further, you had a comment from Assemblymember Norheim to read regarding this. I believe he requested being read into the record.
Yes, please. He is crabbing, so he requested I read this under this discussion item. This road proposed by the state does not now or in the foreseeable future affect Petersburg in any significant way. The remaining funds in its construction budget cannot be magically put into the AMHS budget to fix the funding issue they are having or get our ferries running again. I'm not seeing a legitimate reason why the government in Petersburg feels the need to have an input on a road that will connect solely to Cake. It seems a little presumptuous for us to be sending letters of approval or protest on something Cake itself seems divided on.
Thank you, Clerk Thompson. Open the floor to the Assembly. Discussion from folks? Member Tremblay.
So I appreciate the extra notice on having it as a discussion before the voting action item, because this project was actually approved the year before I moved home. That's how long, 2012, and so I wanted time to do background research. So I reached out to Ellen at the Legislative Information Office, which everyone should do all the time about any state issues, because I was just curious about where it came from, what the process was that it became approved by, and I was also wondering how it was possible to basically, because I see this project as $40 million, which I just can't, so much money, for reasons that Taylor kind of stated. It is a single lane road with minimal access. So I appreciated the background that Ellen gave me, and it's from the beginning, it seems to have been a concept with a maybe in mind, and that, again, project was approved 8 years ago, and it hasn't quite been able to be distilled into, for my mind, a reasonable project since then. So I appreciated the time for me to ask those questions, and more and more people that I talk to seem to be surprised that it's happening so quickly. I asked our clerk when we received this map of the road, which is that on our website yet? Will we be giving it to KFSK?
It's not on our website. It's on the DOT's website for the project.
Okay, and we could get a copy to KFSK to post on their website?
You've already linked to it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Unless there's a different map.
Bless our radio. And so to me, just highlighting the tiny little connection points on such a large project that, again, have no, it's just, it's a lot to me. And so it's a lot of state money. And when I was at the lobbying with the AML in Juneau, and I was there with coastal leaders from around the state, and we were there begging for $10 million for the ferry service, and I told them about the project that was basically about to get started here and what the price tag was. They were collectively shocked, and it doesn't feel good as a neighbor to be taking this kind of money from the state of Alaska, because it is the state of Alaska's money, when we have neighbors around the state who are dealing with empty food shelves and struggling to travel with medical issues. So that's a lot of reasons why I'll be voting to support the letter. As we talk about language, I'm sure we will about the letter, but the overall message of it, to me, I'm glad we're able to have this conversation.
Thanks, Member Tremblay. Member Minucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to thank Senator Stedman's office for sending a letter to us with some of his responses to the misinformation that, the misinformation is the key word there. I still don't understand what we're doing here. Right now, we're building a road to 12 Mile Creek, and then there's going to be a boat ramp there of some sort. And you hear in part of his letter talking about a road, maybe moving that road to 5 Mile, or actually moving it to Kupanoff and having some type of structure, whether it's a ferry or a bridge, that gets people from Kupanoff to Mitkoff so people can drive down to the end of the road and get on some other type of vessel or take a bridge from Mitkoff to somewhere else. I'm not quite sure. He's talking about chip sealing this road to nowhere from Cake to some destination. I'm not quite sure yet. I think everybody's kind of throwing darts at a board. The mayor of Cake said he'd like to see it go to 5 Mile Creek. I think everybody's just trying to figure out what they really want to do here. Like one of the previous speakers said earlier, if you look at the DOT website, it talks about this road the reason it's being built is for subsistence and recreational uses. Then you hear people talking about EMS and the state troopers and this, that, the other, who are going to run over to that road and drive to Cake. And like somebody said earlier in the evening, how are we going to maintain that road? These guys do a heck of a job on this 30 miles that we have to the end of the road here, and they're busy, and we're lucky if they can do the bike path, and I appreciate that. But to pour more stuff over there, they must be going to have some type of DOT structure over there with maybe DOT employees there who are going to maintain that road. I mean, nothing makes sense. This letter that Senator Stedman sent to us, it just, I mean, there's some reasons in it, but they don't really make sense if you look at all that he said. I mean, a road is critical for public safety responses to CAKE and emergency medical evacuations. Well, I mean, I haven't talked to the troopers here, but I would be really surprised if they would respond to an emergency in CAKE or on that road system by taking some type of vessel or vehicle and then going to 12 Mile Creek and then driving somewhere. I mean, talking to our EMS folks, if there's an emergency that they need to respond to, they helicopter. If there's an issue over in Tonka, they would helicopter to. Same thing on Kupernoff. They're not going to get in the harbor boat and drive out into Frederick Sound into some real crummy water with their EMS and whatever they need and somehow magically get from the 12-mile place to wherever the emergency is. I don't know if they're going to stage emergency medical vehicles out there to do this, but you know, Senator Stedman seems like he has a grand vision for doing this project. He's talking about new funding sources that are available. You know, the misinformation on this whole project is coming from his office. I mean, we just got a note at 4:30 this afternoon from somebody who is doing global, what's it called, global NRG, talking about making electricity, generating electricity. And when we get all this flood of information at 4:30 in the afternoon, obviously somebody is concerned about some of the questions that are being asked. And they're just questions. I know we need, you know, if it's going to be a hydro project, then come out and say it's a hydro project. But just don't say, oh no, we're just going to do this for recreation and subsistence. It's just not, it's not right for the people I talk to and for myself trying to understand what it's all about. And so I'm interested to see how the discussion will go in 2 weeks. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Member Mucci. I'll chime in on it right now. Sorry, do you have your hand up, Randy?
No, you can go.
I insist. I don't mean to cut you off. My bad.
You know, I've heard probably more pros than the rest of you on this road. I have a hard time swallowing $40 million as well. I just have a lot of questions still, but I do, other than, I mean, I know that it's not listed and that's not how it's been worded as what it's going to be, but there has been other pros that I've heard of, whether that's really true or not. I mean, I was just in Norway and they have a road system that interties everything with small little ferries, and this might be where the direction that we're going to end up going. I don't know, but there's more to it than just stabbing together a couple logging roads. I don't really understand what the 12 mile, I don't get that, but like I said, there's just a lot of questions. I'm interested to see what we learn about it.
Well said, Member Merle. Yeah, I think there's a lot to learn on this, and like you just mentioned, I've got more questions than I've got answers at this point. And I get some answers, I think I end up with more questions. Mm-hmm. Member Tremblay.
This is where I keep coming back to 2012, which is when this project was approved. And so the fact that we have this many questions, this many years later in the process, to me is rather, this is kind of what everyone hates about government. Like, someone asked, didn't they have to ask us to vote on this? And it was, no, it's, people doing their job, setting together projects, and I had to explain, so in a way, this is a nice civics lesson. We're all learning, people make decisions and do the best they can, and we're all just here learning together. But to confirm, I was actually thinking about what Assemblymember Norheim had mentioned about, is it our role to be giving our input on this topic? And two things. I know the City of Kupernoff gave their input on that today, so that was after Norheim had sent his letter. But they're the only official incorporated city in our borough, and so their official input to us should be, we're here to pass along our input and support other government bodies within our district. And I believe this project is also within our property line, and so that does make this our this is our project, whether we want it or not. And again, it is this amount of state funding being used for our project. So I'm hoping we'll have more of a discussion. I'm sure we will when all of the board members come back. But again, the fact that we have this many questions this late in the process to me is emblematic of why I hope this letter goes through. And no matter what, whoever has an opinion in whatever form, I hope you share those thoughts with the House Finance Committee. That email address is house.finance@akledge.gov, or go talk to Ellen at the LAO and she'll help you put your input in. Any person can do that. And again, we have no actual authority up here. What we're doing is a symbolic, how do we represent our borough to the state legislature? But every single person has the right to put this on the radar because, again, most people probably in that committee, I don't know how many of them were even in the legislature in 2012. So how many of them have actually looked at this project and considered it on its merits? So I think that's a question that should go to them, whether it's by us as a body. I hope it is with the letter. But any individual can put it on their radar. And, you know, we're in the state budget crisis, and as manufacturing, you know, we have answers to it, but this might be an answer.
Thanks, Member Tremblay. Member Mucci, is that you with the hand out there?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, you know, Petersburg has a lot of Norwegian folks that immigrated here, and it's a lot different than Norway. I mean, if Senator Stedman is planning to build roads that connect all the islands with bridges, I'd like to know about it so I can support him on that. I think that'd be really cool. I think it'd be great. What he's talking about here, maintenance costs are not insurmountable and can be contracted out to local businesses, as well as the legislature can provide for maintenance costs with new funding or transfer funds. So how come we can't do that with the ferry system? I mean, he's talking about new funding. I've told several people over the last couple of weeks, if you'd have told me we had a pot shop in town and no ferries running for a month, I'd say you're nuts. But to not have any ferries running in Southeast Alaska, it's just beyond me. You know, this whole thing goes back to misinformation, and I think it's coming directly from Senator Stedman's office, and he wants to explain to me how it's going to be part of the big picture of uniting all the Southeast with roads and intertie. I'd just like to find out how that's going to happen and how we're going to pay for it.
Thank you, Member Mucci. Member Tremblay, see you there again.
Yeah, just one last, your comment about the maintenance cost made me think again when I was in Juneau meeting with the representative from Anchorage who talked about their highways not being maintained this winter. The ones in Anchorage, the road system, their roads were not being maintained, and they were being left unlit and dark this winter. And so he was talking about how many more people were dying and being injured because people were having to walk in the streets that were barely maintained, again, in the dark in Anchorage in wintertime. So I just want us to have all that in our minds when we think about road maintenance. If the place with only roads are not having their roads maintained right now, then I don't know why this is a serious conversation. So.
Thank you, Member Tremblay. Yeah, couple things, and I look forward to the first meeting in March and the whole hopefully the whole assembly is here. That's another reason I wanted it then, is an issue that impacts your community this much. The more of us up here that are discussing it, the better in making decisions. A couple things jumped out at me, though, and I'll touch more on a lot of it next time. But Senator Stedman has several times, a couple points here, several times argued both on the radio and in writing that this road would make emergency medevacs from Cake to Petersburg a possibility. There's point one, and I'll come back to it. The other one is the public safety argument in terms of how having that road would provide access for the trooper to get there for public safety concerns. Simply put, this smacks of selling fear. No two ways around it. I freely admit that's a trigger for me, and I'm trying to be made to feel scared, and this is why I should believe something or vote for something. It does not resonate with me at all, because the fact is those are both complete falsehoods. That's just the way that is. Neither of those are objective realities in any way, shape, or form. And not to belabor the point, if a medical emergency is occurring in Cake, there's just no way someone's being put into a two-wheel drive ambulance, trundled down the road at 2 in the morning for the sake of argument, and that road may or may not be plowed in February in hopes that somebody by contract will be there in their landing craft to shuttle them over. Frederick Sound again, potentially in February, and again in a medical emergency to bring them here to then potentially be flown out anyway. That's just not a reality. I have a hard time saying that even with a straight face. No, if there's a medical emergency, you're getting on a plane and going to significant medical care. It boggles the mind to think about putting somebody in an ambulance and driving them down a one-lane road in the dark to hopefully have a boat waiting for you to get flown out anyway. It makes my pulse go up thinking that's even an argument being made. I expect more from our public officials than to make an argument like that. The other one is the one about the troopers. Again, that smacks of selling fear. A public safety situation is going on, whether major crime, murder, like the Senator Stedman has cited. It's about a 2-hour boat ride in a trooper boat. If it's something that's critical, that's directly to cake. Or you're going to fly in the next day. To argue that we would ask our law enforcement to hop in either the harbor boat to get over there and then have somebody hopefully waiting there to pick them up. Again, assuming the weather is great and we can actually get out there and do this safely. Like, that's not an argument for the road. We can talk about subsistence. We can talk about any of the other potentials with that. But using these two items as selling points, and some of the language used is saying, cake deserves this. They deserve. That's not a fair argument. That's manipulative. I really was hoping Senator Stedman would call in so we could address some of these things, because it doesn't resonate with me at all. And I don't think, again, all other arguments aside, when I talk to people in Petersburg, when they hear those arguments being made, it makes them frustrated and angry. Nobody likes, I shouldn't say it so absolutely, but people I've spoken with don't like being made to feel afraid. That's why this road will solve all their problems, when objectively it's not a reality. I've been speaking often with Joel Jackson, the president of the Organized Village of Cake, and he shares my frustrations with this. His name is attached to the resolution I've put forward. He feels very disrespected, and so do I, that human life is being used as a tool, potentially, to push this forward. I'll speak much more at the next meeting about some of the other pieces, but I really want to drive home those two because they do not resonate with me well at all. I'll hold off on the rest of my points till the resolutions before the whole Assembly. Any further discussion from the Assembly? Okay, moving on. That brings us to discussion item B, Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. Assemblymember Tremblay requested this agenda item, so I will pass it to you.
Yeah, I did. I want to start with thanking our director, our outgoing director, for all the work that she's been doing for our community. We have benefited greatly from her time here, and I'm going to miss her very much. And and I feel like she would have benefited from having a board established. And so hopefully we can rectify that and get a board going. Sounds like from our conversations, the board was dissolved in 2014 in part because of lack of participation, and so I know that that will be an ongoing concern. I'm hoping to have an ordinance on the next agenda for reinstating it with a 5-member board, and that way hopefully this discussion item can help get people thinking about it. I know I've been talking to a lot of people that feel that way. It's any department that has that level of infrastructure, that much community involvement, that much input should have a public board so that people can bring their concerns. They can have, invested parties there to work through issues. And a lot of this is coming too from my background on the library board. I was on that for quite a few years, enough time to do 2 different strategic planning sessions, and watching the balance of you have a board that can set policy and take in input and really help set the structure of the ship, basically, and then you have the director who's in charge of making the magic happen, and then you have the staff that really makes the magic happen, and those 3 things really help keep everything moving smoothly. But the main thing is really a lot of what holds it up is having a board that is able to bring in that public input and help that process go. And so I've checked in with some folks at Parks and Rec, and they like the idea. It really is, though, about having that public input, and so hopefully we'll get this on the agenda. I'd love to talk about it, but that's just where I'm coming from with this. And then the thing is having the people to fill in the names. And so from my understanding, the process would be 3 readings of the ordinance, recreating the board, correct? And we would solicit letters of interest. We would be able to appoint people once it has been approved. And then people would be able to, in this way, it could be a nice testing ground. They could serve until the election in October. And so if people want to be part of an initial foundation board to, if you're an experienced board member, you've been through it a million times, but you're not in it for the long haul, great. We want you. Come join us. Help make it, and then someone else can take it from the election. Am I correct in all of that, Deputy?
You are, yes. Okay. Thank you. I would like to just add, though, that the Parks and Recreation Board, much like the Library Board, is an advisory board. So they actually don't set policy, but they can make recommendations to the department manager, to the borough manager, to the assembly.
Okay. Maybe I meant the board, like, maybe it was Tara's magic making the board think.
Well, and that very well could be, yes. And that's all good. That's all good, because it works there.
Shatter my illusions.
I do have a comment from Member Norheim, please. Thank you.
Absolutely, Debbie, thank you.
This needs to be brought back. I believe if the board had continued to exist, we would not be currently out a Parks and Rec department head. That's it.
Any further discussion on the topic? Go ahead, Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Back in the 90s, I was on the Parks and Recreation Board. Myself, Pete Nielsen, Donna Marsh, Alan Richards, and we were going through city managers as well as department heads, and several times we were the hiring committee that hired the Parks and Rec director. I just want to make sure that before we jump off that cliff by filling a seat on the Parks and Recreation Interim Advisory Board, that I don't want them. I want Steve to be able to finish his review of what's going on at the Parks and Recreation Department. I want him to kind of bring us some of his suggestions and ideas of what can make that Parks and Rec department better. There's going to be some give and take with the Viking Swim Club and the school and the community about what we can and cannot do up there.
Sure.
And once we kind of come to some understanding about what we can and can't do, we'll be talking to the community about stuff. And I think the Parks and Rec Advisory Board would be good, but I sat in on several of the Friends of the Parks and Recreation, whatever they were called, and asked them several times if they would be willing to sit on the board. And they didn't want anything to do with it. And eventually they all disbanded and went away. So that's going to be the hard part, is getting people who are committed to, not telling the department head what to do, but just kind of being an advocate for Parks and Recreation. And I'm all for being an advocate for Parks and Recreation, but like I've told people over the last several weeks, that things are going to change at Parks and Recreation, and we just have to see how it all sorts out. We'll get there, but just might be a little bumpy along the way.
1 second, Member Tremblay, I'm going to chime in on that. Yeah, absolutely, Member Mucci. Going back to when that board was disbanded, there was a series of them that were during that time. It was because of lack of participation. That's, as we all know, it's hard getting people to give freely of their time and energy because it's a lot. And to the other point, which was a good one about letting Steve do what he's doing, absolutely. And from the vision I've got, I don't see any Parks and Rec board precluding any of Steve's work whatsoever. I think as an advisory board, he phrased it very well as being an advocate for the department and trying to offer direction as well. So I just want to echo what you're saying. Member Tremblay.
Yeah, I'm wondering, because it would be a 6-week process of approving ordinances, I'm not sure of what Steve's timeline is with what he's been doing with Parks and Rec, but that's plenty of time for a certain amount of evaluation, and at that point it would probably be pretty great to have a testing ground to work through, talk about what's been happening and setting the new goals and all of that. So I think I understand wanting to help a process be streamlined, but I also see this as, again, because this is, for many people, this is the primary point of contact people have with the borough, is being at Parks and Rec. And so I think it's perfectly natural to want to have that input and be involved with how it's being steered. And so I also think, because that's an interesting point, Assemblymember Mucci, about the Friends Board. There's a Friends of the Library, too, as well as the board. And there's not necessarily that. There's some crossover, but not too much, because for some people, once a month, sitting and talking about rules, that's one of my favorite things to do. But ask me to put on a barbecue, and it's like, I'm working, I'm sorry. So hopefully, if this is resonating with anybody, people will start to, draft those letters and get ready. Or, if you think of a friend that would need that extra poke, please go talk to them, because, I think people in a room talking about stuff is pretty magic. And Parks and Rec is too. We have really amazing facilities, and it would be nice to keep them that way.
I look forward to the discussion over the next 6-8 weeks, whatever it takes to get aboard, get an ordinance in place. Member Wall, do you want to chime in on any of it or no?
Yeah, I mean, no, not, well, sure, since you put me on the spot. No, I think that there's been a lot of, I don't know, turmoil in that department, and I think that an advisory board would be a good idea. I mean, I hope that we could fill the seats, but we won't know unless we try.
Well said. Right on. We'll look forward to that process moving forward. Any further discussion on that? Well, let's see how it goes. Our newest item on the agenda, Assembly Member Comments. Any randoms from our group this evening? Member Nietzsche. Pardon my joke.
Mr. Random. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to kind of report in on the Frederick Point East and the mill rate discussions.
Thank you.
I've been having with the borough. I spent, and some property owners, I spent a few hours last week talking to the borough assessor and Jody Tao and trying to get a better understanding of how the mill rates work. And I've communicated with Miss Candy Woodward a couple times, just keeping her in the loop. And I just want folks to know I haven't forgot about it. It's just a long process. There's a lot to learn. It's a for somebody who's not used to looking at the assessment of values and what's the formula. It's just taken me a while to wrap my head around it, but I'm getting there. So I just wanted to report on that.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it. Another one, Member Mucci, go right ahead.
The other one, the question I had is, we've all turned in the questions and our comments on the questions that PEDC asked us. And I just wanted to check with the borough clerk to make sure that she has the information that we need for the next meeting. I read it a couple times this afternoon, but I just want to make sure it's easy to understand for everybody.
Well, the information that I have is from everyone, and I have put it into a document form that makes sense to me, but now at this point I'm asking you guys to read it, make sure it makes sense to you, because the next step really is up to you.
Okay.
And if you need that information in some other form, or you want me to add more than just the top 5, let me know.
Of course.
Thank you. Just in a follow-up, so you'll want our comments here between now and when the agenda is due out for the next meeting, and so we can have that on the agenda for the March 2nd.
Which isn't very long from now. And I am not going to be here March 2nd. I will not be at the March 2nd meeting.
Okay.
So the deadline, let me see here. Where's my calendar? Next week? Next Monday already is the deadline for agenda items for the March 2nd meeting. So if you guys want me to do something, let me know soon, because I'm busy.
I know.
Monday the 24th, as it is.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you.
Anything else? Well, that brings us down to recognitions. Any recognitions on this fair day? Member Tremblay.
I'd like to recognize and thank all the organizers and everyone who participated in the Elizabeth Pradovich celebration on Sunday. It was an incredibly amazing, powerful day, and of course there were a lot of logistics to be worked out, and so thank you to everyone for every scrap of patience they had for it. I'm going to be working on a resolution or a proclamation for the mayor to hopefully sign about basically recognizing the role Pradovich played in this nation's history. The fact that someone was born here who helped us, was part of a huge team of people that brought about the first anti-discrimination law in the United States is pretty remarkable. And so I know it took a lot of work to make Sunday happen, and there was a lot of passion and dedication, and to recognize the mural that will be put in front of the courthouse, I'm hoping to do that proclamation. And yeah, just thank everyone again for all their work. It was a true gift to the community.
Thanks. Yeah, I would briefly echo some of those sentiments. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. But yeah, Elizabeth Pradovich Day was, I'm not sure what I expected, but it was phenomenal. The energy was great. The people were great. I was deeply honored to be there representing the Assembly. The energy in that room was, words don't do it justice. It was great, for sure. I would really want to thank everyone who participated in that event. Phenomenal. Member Michi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank the Petersburg Police Department. I think Saturday I got to ride in the front seat of the police car for a few hours. And I got to spend 45 minutes with our newest dispatcher from Dillingham, Andrea Naylor. Got to understand what the dispatchers go through and some of that stuff. And then I got to ride around for a couple hours with Officer Andrew Eris, who just came out of the Sitka Academy. And I encourage people to do that. It gives you a real perspective of what they deal with and the frustrations they have in their job and what goes on at night. It's a whole different world after about 10 o'clock than it is at 10 o'clock in the morning. But I just want to thank the police department for letting me do that. It was great.
Thanks, Member Mucci.
Yep.
Anything else? Nope. In that case, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Moved by Member Morrell, second by Member Tremblay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.
So what did you think about